Hi everyone! Today I wanted to do a kind of like paint with me video tutorial on how to paint a yellow flower. Okay, so let's talk about the different paints we're going to be using. I'll be telling you the different colors as we go along, but basically we're going to be using cerulean blue and a darker blue, titanium white. We're going to be using 2 shades of yellow. I have lemon yellow and I have yellow ochre. And we're going to be using 2 shades of green as well. Now the paints that I use, my favorite paints to use are called Marie's painting colors. I find that these are really good. You can also get a variety of different shades if you'd like to be more specific with the colors that you're using. And the type of brushes I'm going to be using is from the brand Bianyo. I'll put the spelling down below. And they're flat brushes. So in the first stage of this painting, I'm going to be using flat brushes. So right now I'm just adding a medium, basically. The medium that I always use is water, but you can also use different blending mediums. So I'm just laying it down on the background part of my painting. As you can see, I already have my outlines drawn. I will be making a video on how to draw the actual flower, especially roses, since I'm planning on doing more tutorials for roses. Some of the tips that I have for drawing the outline is to make sure that you don't draw it on too dark, because then it can mix with the paints, especially for something with, light colors, like in this painting. And if you do find that you've drawn them on a little bit too dark, you can just go ahead and erase some of it off, like what I just did here. So right now I'm applying the cerulean blue. You kind of really want to scrub it in there so you don't have any white patches. Just work it into the canvas with brush strokes. You can make X brush strokes to really get it in there. And now I'm just going to add some white and a darker shade of blue in order to get, that nice blurred background that's not just one-dimensional. I think the difficulty of this drawing is probably intermediate, so it's not that easy. I think making a multicolor background is not easy. Like even for me, it needs a little work. You don't have to be 100% precise about the edges. Just try to be as neat as you can. If you do get it over some of those lines, then that's fine. Just keep going. So basically, if you're going to be adding white, for example, and you want to get that transition between white and the blue, you just add the white on the canvas and kind of work it through with really quick brush strokes. There's kind of this edge between the white and the blue, and this is the edge that you want to make disappear. And so this is the main part where you're going to be working to kind of integrate that white into the canvas and make it blend with the blue. I'm also adding some green. And I'm really sorry that my head keeps popping into the camera. I wasn't aware of that at first. In this stage of the painting, you want to use a liberal amount of paint. You don't want it to be like a wash, especially because we're just getting the background on. And we don't want any, as we said, any white spaces. So you're kind of like dragging the new color over the old color in strokes, and you might have to go back in there and add a darker color if you feel like it's too light. And it's just like this back and forth repetitive process where you don't really stop until you get what you want, which is why I think it is a more intermediate or advanced kind of technique. Just keep adding paint and working it through until you're happy with it. And definitely you have to try to work while the paint is wet. It'll make mixing the colors way easier. So in this stage, you pretty much have to work fast. You know, to make it easier for me, what I do is I always hold a napkin with me, and I kind of brush off the excess paint. There are some artists who prefer having a lot of clean brushes to brush out that transition zone that I was talking about, but I just prefer to have a napkin and I wipe away the excess paint. And so you pretty much have a clean brush, so the brush won't be so affected by a certain color. So for example, if the brush had blue, it's not really gonna mix out the green properly. It's just gonna become blue again. Or if it was green, vice versa. So just make sure you just wipe off the excess when you're, making those transitions between colors. I find that really helps. Sometimes I use my fingers when I feel like I'm not really getting the gradation that I need. I feel like art is just doing what works. Whatever works for you, even if I don't try it or if I don't use that technique, then that's the way for you to go. But what I think these kind of tutorials or these kind of videos are is that they encourage people to start. And I think that's the most important thing, is for everyone just to get started, to get past that barrier of fear that, I can't do this type of painting or whatever. And that's why I think these tutorials are important, because they just kind of give you confidence. Even if the techniques I'm using don't work for you, then at least you're going to be you're going to have a paintbrush in your hand, and you're going to be actually trying, and you're going to find techniques that do work for you. So yeah, just trying to work in more green. I kind of want to get darker in the top and lighter the closer it gets to the flower. But, you know, check your reference photo or whatever you have in your mind. I'm also going to be doing a video on where to get reference photos from, because that is something that you guys asked about. So I'm just going back and adding that darker shade of blue that I told you guys about. In my case, I used Phthalo Blue, PH, Phthalo Blue. They have really interesting names. It makes me kind of want to research the history of each name. So this part is a little bit hard because the rest of the paint has dried, and so I'm trying to incorporate this into, you know, obviously dry paint. So what you can do is this layer, you can actually make it a little bit more liquid using more water. And it's just kind of like a wash above the color, and you just drag it over a big space so that it won't feel like, you know, it's just this kind of isolated part. And that works pretty well. So for now, I'm pretty happy with the background. I'll probably come back and, you know, add more color later on once I have the flower drawn. So now we're gonna do the part where, you know, the other flowers are gonna be in the background. And here I use a lot of white between the colors because I want to give off that blurry, unfocused feel. You know, when they take floral pictures, usually the background is very unfocused, and I kind of want to give that ethereal feel. So we're using here white, and as we said before, lemon yellow, and yellow ochre, I think. And this part is actually a lot more fun than the sky background because it's not as easy to mess up. You know, you're just brushing in the colors, adding white and yellow. It's not as hard. And as you can see, I'm trying to like mix in the yellows and whites with the green so it can all merge into one background. There aren't really identifiable objects here. It's just all one blur, one mix of color. And this was probably the funnest part of the painting because you just get to experiment. Here I'm blending in the yellow into the sky. And like I said, I'm not using that much paint at this point. It's more like a wash. Here I'm adding some green with the blue, which gives this nice color. And I'm leaving these white areas of light, but in reality it's not the canvas. I am putting white paint. That's one of my worst pet peeves, like when someone leaves the canvas white without filling it in. Even if it's going to be white, you have to add that layer. It just gives off this really tacky, bad appearance if you leave the white of the canvas. So as you can see, I put the yellow in, I add white above it, and then I just kind of drag it over the area. And with these kind of backgrounds, so if you have a reference, you don't have to restrict yourself to being exactly like the reference. And either way, it's hard to get something that's exactly like your reference picture, but it's just something to guide you. It's not like a competition of how close you can get it. That's not the point at all. It's just something to guide you. Where should you put more light? Where should you put more sky? Where should you put flower petals? So on the bottom, I'm adding darker colors. So we're gonna have darker green between the flower petals. And I'm also beginning to add the brighter yellow on the bottom. So the more you transition upward, it's going to get lighter and more blurry. And I'm just going to speed along some parts that I don't feel like I have anything to say about, or that I feel like I have already spoken about, just so you won't get too bored. We don't want the video to be too long. See how like in this area where it's kind of sky, where it's kind of light and sky, I'm just really lightly putting this wash of yellow paint, and it's not concentrated at all, and it gives this ethereal, nice, airy, floaty feel. So I'm adding more yellow and more definition of the petals. Add it lightly so that some of the background can still come across. And I'm just going to add until I feel like it feels right. Now I'm starting to add more of the yellow ochre. So what I do is I add the darker yellow on the bottom and the outlines, and in the middle it's going to be kind of lighter where the light hits the petal, and it kind of just gives more dimension. And I'm just adding a little bit of the yellow in the sky just because I feel like it needs a little bit more color. Now we're in the third stage, and this is probably the simplest stage, even though it makes the most difference, obviously. And as you can see, I wasn't perfect with my outlines. There, some of the blue did go onto the outlines of the flower. And so what you can do, it's really simple, don't freak out. Just take a sponge. You can cut off a small piece, dip it in water, not too much water, dip it in water enough that it's wet, but not dripping. You just kind of, scrape away at the parts where it's over the outline. And this is just to regain the natural texture of the original canvas, and so it won't feel like you have paint over paint. And sometimes that can come across. And so once you've got that done, make sure you don't have anything else on the canvas, some dirt or some excess paint or anything like that. Wipe it away with a tissue, and then you're ready to start. For this part of the painting, we're going to be using two types of brushes, the flat brushes that we've been using so far, except in smaller size, obviously, and we're going to be using round brushes. And I like to use them for the details, for the fine lines, for the folds of the flowers. I find that they really give a more accurate details and precision. They're a lot easier for beginners who aren't used to flat brushes in making those small lines using the flat brush. You could use both, but this is just what I do. What I usually start with is the lighter color. So I'm starting with lemon yellow and white, a mixture of lemon yellow and white. And I'm taking my time here in working on each petal, identifying each petal. Some of my other tutorials, I kind of just do one wash over the entire flower, and then I go back and identify each petal. But if you have time, work on each petal, give it time, make sure the edges are correct. And it's actually a really relaxing process at this point. You're just filling in, with that light yellow. And as you go along, you kind of can tell where it's supposed to be lighter and where it's supposed to be darker. And it's the easiest thing in the world to make it darker or to make it lighter. While it's still wet, you just add some more white and you mix it in, or you add a darker shade of yellow and you mix it in. You have to, I always say this, kind of study your reference. Just spend 10 minutes just looking at it and figuring out, okay, where does the light fall? What parts are going to be lighter? Where is there more shadow? Just get to know your subject. Get to know this flower that you're painting. I'm just going to speed this up because it's pretty much all the same. The edges of the flowers, of the petals, is going to be darker than the middle generally. And anywhere where a petal falls over a petal, it's going to, the lower petal is going to be darker, which is why I'm leaving those until the end. And when you're painting the edges of it, you might feel like you didn't get all of the exact outline out with the sponge, and it's going over the blue and it's kind of not 100% yellow. It's still, some of that blue is still coming across. Then you just wait for it to dry and you add another layer, and if it still comes across, wait for it to dry again and add another layer and it'll be fine. And look who decided to join us today. This is my nephew Leith. He's always my assistant when I'm starting a new painting. I have no idea why my voice is coming out so scratchy. I think I'm beginning to lose my voice or something. So now I'm starting to add the lower petals. And I'm adding more of the ochre in this case, and I'm letting the yellow be more concentrated. Okay, so once you've got pretty much your base down, all the yellow down, it's all filled, this is the part where I use round brushes, not flat brushes anymore, because just to get the really fine details, I think it's better I use number 2 or even number 1 round brush. And at this point I'm using raw sienna and the yellow ochre together to give the darker shadows and the darker grooves of the flower. And this is really where the flower is going to start to come alive. And I go back and forth between light and dark. So I might feel like, okay, this needs to have a highlight, and I add, more white onto the flower. It's just a back and forth process. Here I'm adding the shadow of the flower onto the lower petal. And this is fun, soothing process. I always say that art should be a mode of therapy. It's so soothing, and it makes you kind of forget all your worries and everything, you know, your daily life problems. It's really nice. So here I'm adding, you know, kind of the folds of the flower, and these have to be applied in really thin lines in order to give the right effect, which is why I use the number 1 or the number 2 paintbrush. Same goes for the lines, the shadow that one petal makes on another petal. Like I said, really study your reference and try to emulate it as best as possible. These tiny details are really what make the world of difference, because up to the point where we just washed over the flower with yellow, I mean, it did not look good. Like, it didn't look realistic. It didn't have dimension. So and the closer you get to the middle part of the flower, the darker it's going to be. So that part's going to have like an accentuating shadow, and so usually that part's going to be darker. So now I'm going to be doing the middle of the flower. Yeah, I'm not even sure what you call the middle part of the flower. I'm pretty sure I took it in high school biology, but maybe the stigma? I don't know, it's the part where the pollen, where bees get the pollen. Anyway, when you do this part, because the colors are darker, it's really going to give contrast, and it's really going to make the painting feel more alive. The colors that I used here were burnt sienna and black and burnt umber. So these are the three colors that I used for this part. And first you start off with white and burnt sienna. You know, get the lighter colors in first, and then you start defining it with the darker colors. I find that that works best. Also, so that you can preserve the outlines that you drew before. If you just started with the dark, they're going to completely disappear. So generally, when you're doing acrylic painting, apparently I was pronouncing that wrong. It's not acrylic, it's acrylic. I'm always up for learning new things, so thank you guys for pointing that out, that I was pronouncing it wrong all those years. Okay, so like I said, we're just putting in the lighter color, and then we're going, you know, darker and then darker and darker to add more definition. And it's crucial to use a really small brush for this. So one, they even have 0 brushes, but one is fine. As you can see, I usually actually use a piece of paper, drawing paper or construction paper. I use it to mix the colors on it because sometimes my palette can get really crowded. The plastic of the palette doesn't really help with getting off the paint, getting off the excess paint. And so that's what I kind of use it for. So I'm just going to speed up this process. Which is basically the parts that are kind of covered by the petals at the bottom are going to be darker. And you have these kind of like circular, kind of oval, I don't know what you call them. They're kind of like these little mound shaped things that make up this part of the flower. And so the bottom of those are going to be darker, and around them is going to be dark because, you know, their shadow drops on to the ones that are behind them. And so it's just this process of, you know, outlining them and then outlining the ones behind them and so on. And the darker you get, the more 3D it's going to feel. So eventually don't be afraid to use really dark tones. Okay, and now for the center of the flower, it's blue, and that also gives a nice contrast color. So first just do a blue wash with, you know, one-dimensional, one-color blue wash. And then we're going to go back with lighter and darker shades of blue. And they're kind of like these stringy, interconnected strings. Kind of like if you had a rubber band ball. So you're just going to be working on, you know, defining the ones below and the ones above, and usually the ones under are going to be darker. The ones over are going to have more highlights, which consists of basically just adding a tiny bit of blue and white. Like we always say, you know, darker in the edges, so we have really darker blue, the phthalo blue, or you can add a little bit of black. And now we're just going back to those kernel looking things. I don't even know what they're called, but we're going back and we're adding white and we're adding more black. You know, we're adding highlights and shadows. Okay, so now we're pretty much done with that. We're going to go back and add more shadows in the actual flower and between the flower petals. And I've repeated this throughout, but this stage is really important, so take your time on it. You don't want the shadows to feel like they're just these added on things. You want them to be incorporated into the drawing. So you're going to be using water in this phase. You're just going to drag it across the petals so that it'll be more integrated. I don't know if you can see it, but in this stage what I'm doing is I'm not really filling in the paint. It's not like washing the paint over the desired area. No, I'm actually painting really thin lines which are really close together to fill in the areas that I want to fill in, and this gives a really high level of precision. This technique needs a little while to get used to, especially with a medium like acrylic, but it's really helpful, I find, in doing small details and doing the finishing touches. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop now. I think it's pretty good, even though I'm someone who just really loves contrast, and I would love to keep adding darker and darker shadows all day. Now we're going to paint the stem, and this part is pretty easy. We're going to be using 2 shades of green, Viridian green and emerald green, and of course we're going to be adding white or yellow when we want it to be lighter, and we're going to be adding blue or black when we want it to be darker. It's important to study your reference so you can get an idea of where there's going to be reflections on the leaf. So I find that really gives a realistic dimension when you kind of give that glossy, reflective feel for the leaf, depending on what type of leaf it is. But this doesn't take much time or effort at all. So now I'm just going with my paintbrush. There are some parts where the flower and the sky, you know, there's a little bit of some white that was it filled in, or you know, just going back, making sure everything's right. Also to the petals in the bottom, just going back, adding more color, really getting everything together. I always say this about paintings, that it's impossible for them to be absolutely perfect. And I tell this to myself, especially because I am a perfectionist and I'm always obsessed with making it better, and I'm such a hard critic on myself. But I think this is pretty good, even though I would have liked to keep adding onto it. But I did kind of have a deadline because I painted this for my best friend who is moving, you know, as a goodbye present. But I am happy with it, and I hope you guys are too. So now we're just going to do the sides of the canvas, and I feel like most artists do this in the beginning, but I just keep it until the end. And it might seem a little bit daunting if you haven't done it before, but it's actually really simple. So what you want to do usually is incorporate the color that's most dominant on the side that you're doing it on. So here I'm kind of going to do a gradation of blue to green to yellow, and it's a lot easier than you think, you know, just. And here I use a flat brush, and try to use a brush that's kind of the same size of the width of the side of the canvas. It'll make it a lot easier. Yeah, start with the blue, add some white and some green, and then gradually you drag the color into the yellow. You have to try to not go too close to the edge, so you want to get everything covered, but you don't want the color to show from the front of the canvas. So every few minutes, just kind of check that you're not going over the actual painting on the front, because that gives a really bad effect. So the bottom, I'm just going to do a wash of just one tone of yellow. And the other side, the same that I did for the first side. So yellow, and then transition to green, and then to blue. And you can use your finger just to drag across the color if you don't feel like that the colors are merging properly. And for the top, I'm just doing some blue, and you can make a little bit of a gradation with white and darker blue, but it's really not that big of a deal. And so just let those dry. So just let that dry, and as you can see here, I have a little bit of paint, and that's normal. You're going to make mistakes, and it's really easily solved. Just take a napkin, dip it in a little bit of water, and wipe it off. So that's the nice thing about acrylic, is that once it dries, if you make any mistake above the dried area, and if it is recent, so that's the key. If it's recent, then you can easily rub it off. You don't want to like rub it too hard, because then you will remove the initial layers. But yeah, it's pretty simple. And don't forget to add your signature. And we're done. So I really hope that this has been helpful for you. I really hope that you try this. It's simple. It'll also help you practice your backgrounds, because I feel like backgrounds are a place where a lot of people struggle, and they're really a key component of all drawings. So yeah, give me recommendations of tutorials that you would like to see. I'm really excited to add more videos on this channel. Anything you need help on, give me recommendations. And I really hope you enjoyed this video, that it was clarifying enough. Thumbs up, please, and subscribe. And have a great day.